is the Atlanta Sports Party, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into the Atlanta Sports Party, your home for the best Atlanta sports talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere but right here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tenitra Batiste, and joining me today are Aaron Freeman and Maria Martin. The Atlanta Sports Party is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, the Braves have been down bad, but we found a good silver lining in their performance today, their win against Orioles. We'll talk about it in the deep dive, and we'll talk about a Wheeler alum on the cusp of greatness when we go around the Metro. But first, let's talk about the league not laying down the hammer on the Falcons. Aaron, the NFL finally announced its decision in its investigation of whether or not the Atlanta Falcons tampered with Kirk Cousins and others ahead of the official opening of the legal tampering period in free agency. Now, there was a lot of drama these last couple of months. Things have been overblown in terms of thoughts of the franchise potentially losing as much as a first-round pick. But the league kind of went maybe easy in some people's estimations, actually determining that the Falcons would only lose a fifth rounder in next year's draft. They'd get a fine of $250,000, and GM Terry Fontenot would also be fined $50,000. So I ask you this, Free, as our resident Falcons expert, our host of Locked On Falcons, is this fine fair, given that the Falcons were also cited for, quote, improper contact with both Darnell Mooney and Charlie Werner?
Well, T, I just want to slap myself on the wrist because that's basically what the NFL just did to the Falcons. As far as NFL penalties go, like, this is as light as they come. They did lose a draft pick and get fined for technically breaking a rule, but basically the rule that they broke was, the rules are you're allowed to contact a player's representation during the legal tampering window that began on March 11th.
Yes.
You're not allowed to have direct contact to the player until March 13th. And apparently the Falcons had contact with not only Kirk Cousins, Darnell Mooney, and Charlie Werner after they had agreed to terms with them about sort of like travel arrangements or whatever. So basically someone sent a text or answered a phone call that they probably shouldn't have in the building. And they basically lost a fifth round pick and got a significant fine to you or I, but to the people in that building, it's like Arthur Blake. He sneezes into $250,000 at this point. But I think the league gave the Falcons a relatively light penalty. They broke a rule. I think there's plenty of healthy debate on whether or not that should be a rule, that once you agree to terms with a player, like, you should be able to. But I think the Falcons got off pretty good, so I'm not going to be losing any sleep over a fifth round pick.
Yeah, I was thinking the same. Like, unless you're going to turn into the next Grady Jarrett, I think we're all good on the fifth round pick next year. And listen, Terry Fontenot has shown us also that he can be creative in sometimes securing more picks with a little bit of wheeling and dealing, or he's been able to do some crafty and creative things with the picks he has. So I'm like you, I'm not so concerned. I think that is just about what you called it, a slap on the wrist, and it could have been far worse. I think that that's one of those things to where also it's kind of like a little nod or a notice to the league to say, hey, well, they kind of did something wrong, so we kind of got to say something, because we don't want everybody else to think, oh, the other 31 franchises can do the same, and then it becomes a situation that's getting out of hand or out of control. But when you think about those teams that had been docked a first rounder, I always thought that it was a rather dramatic turn to think that the Falcons would get the same for something like this, because it was fairly innocuous. So Kyle Pitts is kind of reaching out to, can you blame him with the quarterbacks that he's had to endorse since Matt Ryan's departure, that he would be overly excited about reaching out to Kirk Cousins? But you think about some of the teams that have been levied the first round pick fine in the past, and I just didn't feel like there was anything as far as what we'd known about the investigation before today and actually what we know now. Still don't think there was ever anything that would have risen to the occasion of a first round pick being taken.
Yeah, the precedent to me was more the third round pick that the Chiefs had gotten.
That's what I thought it was third round. I agree.
So that's why, I sit here and I go like, oh, only a fifth? It could have been a third. And the Chiefs, I think, lost a sixth the following year. So they lost 2 draft picks as part of that and got fined much more heavily for that. But the league basically deemed that what the Falcons were doing was just basically somebody in the building, as I said, was sending texts or making phone calls that they probably shouldn't have made after agreeing to the player, not contacting the player beforehand or anything like that. That was egregious. And as you talked about that first round pick with the Dolphins, that was egregious tampering, because the owner was basically flying Sean Payton and Tom Brady out to his yacht when they were under contract with other people, multiple times. I think so that was what merited a first round. It never felt like the Falcons deserved that type of scrutiny. Maybe thought a third round pick, but again, because it seemed less than apparently what the Chiefs did a decade ago with Jeremy Maclin, a fifth.
Yeah. And I think too, when you have, and sometimes reputation matters, and the Falcons have been a team that pretty much has been above board. They've kept their noses clean in most instances, in most areas. So you don't want to heavily penalize a team like that really hasn't done anything all that egregious. I mean, I always thought it would be a third rounder, but it was probably me thinking third round. More so because I was just thinking, okay, they might just want to make a statement, meaning the league might want to make a statement, but I never felt like it rose to that level and it was that egregious. So I think the proper result was determined today. I think that the fines being meted out were appropriate, and I think now the Falcons can just move on and focus on what they really need to focus on, which is ensuring that at the end of the day, it's about the product that's on the field, getting that product ready as they wrapped up mandatory mini camp this week, and of course getting themselves ready for training camp. So speaking of that, the Falcons announced late Tuesday they signed corner Harrison Hand. It's another piece, I feel like, to try to shore up the other side of the field opposite AJ Terrell. But real talk, Free, as Terrell approaches this critical year that could dictate his future with the Falcons, or if there is a future with the Falcons, I mean, do you think someone like Hand is really going to give AJ that chance to kind of return to form, where we'll either see the AJ we saw early on, or we'll see the AJ that we've been kind of waiting to see? Or do you think, okay, this is just another piece, like I mentioned, and that, hey, Terry Fontenot is still out there working the phones or still checking the logs to see if there's a true quote unquote other lockdown corner that's out there to complement Terrell?
Yeah, I think this is another body that they're bringing in to bolster competition more so than this is going to be the solution to their problem. I think the player that they could have signed that would have been the potential solution just retired this past week, which was Steven Nelson, who was a free agent that was very productive last year with the Texans and seemed to be a great fit into this defense, and has been a fixture as a starting cornerback for like 7-8 years in the NFL. Decided to hang it up after a pretty solid career. So I think, to me, the interesting thing about the Hand signing is we've seen the Falcons over the last couple of months focus on size at the cornerback position more so than where with Mike Hughes and Clark Phillips, who seemingly are the front runners at that starting cornerback spot opposite AJ Terrell. And they brought in guys like Kevin King. They brought in a guy like Anthony Johnson, who's like 6'2". Hand is like 6 foot, 190 pounds with long arms. I remember Hand when he came out in the draft in 2020 because he sort of fit the Falcons profile that they liked in corner in terms of a long corner that had explosiveness back when Dan Quinn was the coach. So clearly, I was onto something there because they circled back 4 years later with Raheem now getting Hand. But I think right now the Falcons are just trying to bring in more size at that position. That's something that's lacking in Mike Hughes and Clark Phillips, just to give them maybe some alternative options if they maybe need a specific, we know Mike Evans still exists. I can't believe I really wanted him to go sign somewhere else this offseason, but it's like he's still going to torment this defense, and they just need more big bodies there that can kind of deal with that side of the size that Mike Evans is bringing to the table. But I think Hand is mostly, calling him a camp body is somewhat disrespectful, but he's more a guy that's there to boost competition rather than a guy that I would pencil in as a potential starter. Yeah,
I think there's still more than enough room. And I don't know where they would get this guy from because, like you said, Nelson just retired, but more than enough room to try to still look out for someone who can complement AJ Terrell. Because you think about the fact that if you looked across the league, he could potentially be in that top third or that top quarter of corners, of the best corners in the league. But on the same token, it's kind of hard to put him there with guys like a Denzel Ward because the numbers don't show, right? But the numbers probably don't show because no one ever really throws to you because they know that on the other side of the field, there's been no guy other than that short window of time where we saw, I think, Casey Hayward, and it was the shortest of windows where he had someone to compliment him. So yeah, hopefully Terry Fontenot is still out there kind of looking for that guy. But again, like you said, Harrison Hand has the body type and maybe could show improve in camp that he'd be viable to work that other side and maybe just bring a little competition to the young guys ahead. So the Braves, they've been down bad for a minute, but there's actually a silver lining because they came up good in Baltimore today, and we'll talk about that in the deep dive. This episode of our Atlanta Sports Party is brought to you by Game Time. So Game Time makes getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier, and you might want to get it as quickly as possible because that series might be over in a couple of days, but prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the tip-off. So if you want to wait to see if it's going to be a sweep with the Celtics over the Mavs, or if you want to wait to see if there's a Game 5 and you want to wait until the last minute, Game Time is where you want to pick up that ticket because they have last minute deals that are killer, all in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee that takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. So think about it. Game 5 in Boston, if it goes back to Boston, that would be a pretty cool thing to see them hang the 18th banner in that franchise's history. Now, you can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, but also for concerts, comedy, theater, and more. You can even save more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. And you can see seat views that give you a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, and toggling the all-in pricing feature shows the total upfront. So no surprise fees at checkout. You can take the guesswork out of buying those NBA Finals tickets with Game Time by downloading the app, creating an account, and using code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Again, that's Locked On NFL, LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Now, terms do apply, but you can download that Game Time app today for last-minute tickets and lowest prices guaranteed. So for the first time since September of 2017, the Braves lost 5 games in a row after, of course, that 4-2 loss to the Baltimore Orioles Wednesday. But Maria, they bounced back. They escaped, however you want to call it, with a 6-5 win in the series finale to avoid the sweep today. So since we finally have something good to talk about with these Braves, not the bad, not the ugly, just kind of the good today, let's recap kind of a nice end to this 9-game road trip, but starting with really another great all-star turn from our MLB ERA leader, Reynaldo Lopez.
Yeah, Reynaldo Lopez really kept them pretty silent through 6 innings, right? And that was really great. He had a 2-hit 6-inning stretch, and really the O's couldn't figure him out. And they've been hitting so well over the series and really as of late. So for Reynaldo to slow them down and to really give the offense a chance to do something as well, I thought that was really important because we've talked so much about this Braves pitching staff, right? And how they've really been the people that have kept this team afloat. Well, now it was a little bit of good on both sides. So that's really encouraging to see. We literally talked about it yesterday, is that the hitting was going to get better and they were going to have some baseballs fall at some point. Today was that day. And I was just waiting for them to help out their pitchers. And finally, the offense was able to do that. But another great performance from Reynaldo Lopez. I mean, performances like that are really always going to keep the Braves in it. And the bats needed to click today. They certainly did that. It's very encouraging, especially heading into a series against Tampa, who Tampa's playing very good right now.
Indeed. And yeah, for him to walk away with yet another game where we saw no earned runs and just one balls, 8 strikeouts, such a dominant performance once again. And also, Maria, just to see Reynaldo Lopez go so deep in that game, 6 innings, we know that's important so that the bullpen isn't taxed. And we got what we expect to get early on in the game, right? Because you get a Marcell Ozuna double that gives the Braves a couple runs early, which it's always nice to kind of get that out front. But then to see Ozzy Albies, put something on the board. Or we don't talk a lot about Orlando Arcia doing much, but he actually added a run there as well. And then, of course, we know we got a couple of insurance runs later on. But yeah, this is a conversation that you and I just yesterday, scratching our heads, didn't really have anything that we could say. Brian Snicker the day before saying, hey, I don't really have a why to this, but ultimately speaking, it's just good to see that here we are just a day later and the bats finally came alive. And also nice to see that although it was a 4 nothing lead going into the 7th. And yeah, you kind of didn't like seeing Pierce Johnson allow this Orioles team to get back in it and get to within one run. Ultimately speaking, you got exactly what you needed in the end. And I said 6-5, check that, 6-3. Give the Braves the credit that they deserve in holding these Orioles to just 3 runs. But yeah, for them to be able to close out with Michael Harris, the second scoring, and with Matt Olson, I think that's another one that, Maria, was very encouraging to see Matt Olson get that double and be able to put those insurance runs on the board late.
Yeah, I mean, you saw that 2-run home run yesterday. So for him to continue to hit in multiple games, I think is a very encouraging sign because he has struggled as well. He hasn't struggled as deeply as some of his other teammates have at the plate, but certainly having back-to-back games where he's cashing in on runs at the plate, I think that's very, very important. The only 2 people that didn't contribute in the lineup today would be Adam Duvall and Austin Riley. And Austin is experiencing a slump that we have not seen him ever have. Now, Austin has had slumps and he's had growing pains ever since he's come up into the organization. However, this is very uncharacteristic for Austin. I think it is for everybody that's hitting the baseball right now for the Braves. But to only have 2 guys in your lineup not contribute is a win for me. Yeah. Because we've been talking about a bunch of guys in the lineup not even getting the bat to the baseball at all. So the only people who put up zeros when they were at the plate were those 2 guys. So it's good, not the middle of the order, not the top of the order. Everybody is contributing. And I think that's really what helped, especially the O's. Keep in mind, they had won 6 straight games heading into this one. They are one of the hottest teams in baseball. So proud of the Braves. Let's hope they can continue this hitting when they come back to Truist Park and play Tampa.
Yeah, I think it's good for them to come back home on that high of a note. And like you said, to get a quality win over a quality team. Now, speaking of quality wins, of course, Maria and I hope that there's a quality win in Indiana tonight. Of course, the Atlanta Dreamer on the road to face the Indiana Fever. We'll see him again here in State Farm Arena in Atlanta next Friday. But we also know that today's a big day for the W overall because WNBA All-Star voting starts today. Now, last year, Maria, the Dream were just in a really fantastic place. They were riding high, heading into the postseason, and they were able to get nods for, I think it's Alicia Gray, Cheyenne Parker, now Cheyenne Parker Titus, as well as Ryan Howard. A little bit of a different place where they are this year, up and down. But is there anyone whom you've seen in their performances so far this season for the Dream where you say, hey, maybe that player will get a nod this year?
Yeah, I mean, 3 of them come to mind for me. Alicia Gray would be one of them again. She's consistently scoring. She has the most points per game of the team right now. And then Ryan Howard, who was named to the Olympics 3x3 team. She'll be headed to Paris this summer. She should get a nod as well, in my opinion. And then, of course, the veteran, Tina Charles. You can't forget about her. She is a fabulous forward. She's been contributing in all aspects of her game, as you would expect one Tina Charles to do. So I think if you're going to be thinking about All-Star voting, those 3 come to mind for sure, and they all deserve a nod.
Yeah, indeed. And when, like you said, when you look at the stats, Ryan is still right up there. And interestingly enough for me, and actually exciting because that means you're really seeing her evolve in her 2-way play, is she's at the top of the league in rebounding at her position. I think that's really positive because we all know Ryan can shoot the lights out of the ball. That's why she was selected to go to Paris for 3-on-3. But ultimately speaking, to see that she's getting that 2-way play, and that's important to her. That's, of course, going to be important for the Stream team down the stretch as well. But yeah, I got to agree with you. Alicia Gray also in, I think maybe the top 5 in the league in assists. So she's a solid season in terms of just trying to get other players involved. But for me, it's Tina Charles. Tina Charles has been such a refreshing addition to this team. We can't say enough, like you said, about the wily veteran. You know, she of Rookie of the Year, she of MVP, she of WNBA champion. I mean, there's so many things, but to see her doing it at a high level in 2024, when she was someone who said, you know what, it's been real WNBA, but, you know, maybe I'm going to go on to greener pastures. Coach Tanisha Wright gets her to come back. And ultimately speaking, we get to see the Tina Charles that I believe is in agreement with you is playing at an all-star caliber level. So yeah, all-star voting starts today for the W. Guys definitely need to get out there and vote for these Atlanta Dream Team members. Now, Brent Key said something interesting to me today, Maria, at an alumni event for Georgia Tech. He did not mince words when he talked about Georgia football. Now, he was asked the question about Georgia football, and Key said, quote, "There's nothing I hate more in the world." It's probably the only thing I actually hate. When I say hate, like truly despise everything about it. I really do. Shots fired or friendly fire?
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, I don't really think it's friendly, but I also don't think it's intentionally targeted at Georgia. I think that what we're forgetting in college football these days, because of the way that things are changing and because there's NIL, and I'm not saying that's bad, I think it's good. I just think we forget how deeply rooted these rivalries are sometimes. And because it has been so lopsided between Georgia and Georgia Tech, I think in Brent's mind, he's trying to reinvigorate that hate a little bit more. Obviously hard to be as competitive and hateful towards somebody who beats you consistently every year. But I think he's just trying to reinvigorate what he grew up with. Remember, he played for Georgia Tech. And so it is a very deep hated rivalry. And all of us who grew up liking a specific team have one other team that we hate so deeply. And so I think that that's just part of that. And I think that that's really smart for Brent to do that at an alumni organization, because it's indicating, hey, we're going to be more competitive, as you saw last year in that game, towards Georgia. And it's going to be a rivalry once again, because the Dogs don't see that as a rivalry anymore. But he's just trying to reinvigorate that a little bit.
I was thinking the same thing, like a little bit of shots fired, a little bit of friendly fire, because although I know he does not want to poke the bear too much on the Georgia side, I know that there's also a desire to really kind of get the base riled up for the Yellow Jackets, because like you said, they started to really show some signs last season. They've had a good offseason, both recruiting and both for training camp. So yeah, you want to get your guys motivated to say, when we get to that game on November 29th, expect that we're going back to the hate days, and we're going back to the days where we're going to be competitive. And this is going to be a game that you definitely want to watch out for. You want to look to see what we can do, because we're convinced that we're that team. Now we want to show and prove it on the field. Now, when we come back of showing and proving, me too. Like, I don't mind when you put out that ticket. All you got to do is cash it in. We'll talk about a Wheeler alum who put out the ticket and is cashing it in. He's on the cusp of greatness, and we will talk about him in Around the Metro. Locked On Sports Today is a free 24-hour sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the noise. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, Maria, if I remember correctly, the whole sports party crew, including Jarvis Davis, who's not with us, who will be back next week. I think we all picked the Boston Celtics to win the NBA Finals over the Dallas Mavericks. And right now, Wheeler alum Jaylen Brown's play, Maria, looks like we're actually geniuses because we predicted correctly. I think right now it's more of a question of not so much will the Boston Celtics win it, because 164 times teams have tried, teams have failed to come back from an 0-3 deficit, but rather do they sweep and become that first team who swept in the conference finals and then swept in the finals, or do they take it all in game 5, 6, or 7? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you and I were on the Celtics in 6 train, and Jarvis picked Celtics in 7, I believe. I think it's really hard for me to see them going 6 right now. I don't know that they're going to sweep. I just feel like that's so rare, and it's a very hard thing to do. But it's also really hard to count out the way that Boston is playing right now. I mean, they are beating Dallas in every aspect of their game. And, Dallas showed some signs of life in game 3, especially in the beginning. And I was like, oh, wait a second, Dallas is rocking, because they had gone out to a really good start. But I even looked at my producer and I said, that lead will go away and Boston will come back and Boston will do what they do. And they have just had Dallas figured out from the very beginning, and Dallas has no answer for them. Jaylen Brown being a big reason for that. I mean, every single facet of their game right now is working. I'm going to change my answer and say Boston in 5.
Yeah. Can I change mine too? Can I follow your lead on that one? Because I feel the same. Like 35-19 in the third quarter was the all-telling stat of all stats last night. And like you said, Dallas battled in the beginning. Dallas battled in the end, got it back down to 2. But ultimately speaking, there's just something different about the approach of this particular Boston Celtics team, maybe more so than anything we've seen from them in the past. And I really do think that they're getting over the hump. I'm seeing something in Jaylen Brown, just that mindset of being more vocal and then going back and giving guys a thumbs up and saying, hey, man, good job. And that bench just going crazy, even when their reserves were in, making critical moves. And yeah, like you said, it seemed like every counter punch that the Mavericks had for the Celtics then countered the counter. And when you can do that, this is a team last year, Maria, where had they blown a 21-point lead, it would have been a truly blown lead, i.e. they would have lost that game. But this Celtics team. I wasn't surprised that they were able to somehow gel, get it together, close it out with some key components. And I know we're talking about Jalen, of course, because he's local to Atlanta, but also Al Horford, the former Atlanta Hawk, who made that huge defending play against Kyrie Irving, got him off his shot just enough for him to miss that critical three. It'd be exciting to see him too. But I think that being able to close this out in Boston and hoist that 18th flag up the pole, I just think that would be so cool. I think those guys have it on their minds. Like Jason Tatum kept saying last night, no, we're not looking at it as like one more game. We're just kind of looking at it as we've got to get it like when it comes. And I thought to myself, like, they'd love to just sweep it, but let's just be real. They'd be just as happy to be able to get back to Boston and kind of give those fans that satisfaction on their home court. Now, speaking of satisfaction, Charlie Condon, my goodness, has given the Dogs fans just so much to be satisfied for. I know that the team overall fell short, but this guy was just amazing, even down to the last at bat in the Super Regional against NC State, where they fell just short of the College World Series. But for all of the work that he's done for this Dogs program this past season, he was a recipient of the Dick Hauser Trophy. It's awarded to the top player in college baseball by the National College Baseball Writers Association. Biggest honor for him to date. And of course, we know that's good for him. Just adds and stacks to the case for him to be the number one MLB pick in their next draft. But I also think it's a good recruiting tool, as the Dogs are hoping to get a good haul in the transfer portal. And it seems like they've already started getting a lot of interest, snagging some local kids, and more importantly, maybe even adding, in addition to the outfield and the infield, they've got a lot of interest from some viable pitchers out there.
Yeah, I know a lot of people were disappointed in the end to their season, which I understand. They were so close to getting back to Omaha, and it's been 16 years since they've been there. However, having Wes Johnson have a tremendous year like he did in his first year as the head coach, right? He has Major League Baseball experience, and Charlie Condon is an easy sell because I don't think that there's going to be more Charlie Condons out there. I think that he is a once in a generation player, and Wes Johnson echoed that as well. But what I believe is that he was a walk-on, and he was a guy that nobody paid attention to, and which I don't understand. He's 6'6", he's huge. He's everything that you want in a baseball player. And he walks on at Georgia and sets records that the NCAA had never seen before. And so for Wes Johnson, that's an easy recruiting tool. I took this kid that nobody believed in, and look what he became. And so I think that it's very good not to use him as the exact tool, because again, I don't think that there is a plethora of Charlie Condons out there. He is one of one. And I think he's going to be perhaps the top pick in the MLB draft next month. But I do believe that they're on the right track with Wes Johnson at the helm, with the players that they've had, and just getting back to a super regional. Hosting one is a really big deal in college baseball. It's hard to do. And especially in the SEC, where baseball is king and there are a lot of really good teams. So, it's a good recruiting tool. And I think that Georgia's on the right track. And I think that you can expect them to be in Omaha within the next few years for sure.
Yeah, I would agree. And this is the same kind of recruiting tool that a Kirby Smart's able to use when he's able to say, hey, I was able to develop these players and look where they are now, not just in the NFL, but how they got to the NFL. Many of them in the first round, many of them in the top 10 within the first round of their respective drafts. So, yeah, I think that to your point, for Wes Johnson to be able to do what he did with Charlie Condon and with this program in the first year, I think this all bodes very, very well for Dogs baseball in the future. Now, 11 Alive, your station, as we see the background, and our podcast sister station shared a story online about a man who celebrated his 100th birthday at a bowling alley. Now, personally, I can think of better places to celebrate the Century Market if I ever get there, but how about you?
I don't know. I feel like this is so bad, but I feel like a lot of older people love the bowling alley. So maybe I'll get to that point in my life. I don't know. I mean, right where I sit right now, that would not be my first choice. I would want to celebrate maybe at a beach somewhere, just be chilling outside, I don't know. Bowling alley was a very interesting choice. However, I do see a lot of elder people at the bowling alley. So look, if I'm 100 years old and I can play bowling well at that point, then kudos to me, because I'm doing something right.
You know what? You were right about that, because they did say in the article that he literally still carries a 14-pound bowling ball, and he still gets a score of 200. Are you kidding me?
Yeah. For him. He's going to live to 125. Is that possible? I don't know.
Yeah, it might be. And if it's possible, it's probably him. But yeah, I'm with you. I'm probably on a beach dancing somewhere, because as you guys know, Maria and I have talked to you guys before about the fact that we are dancers. So she and I would probably be on a beach somewhere getting our dance on. We appreciate you stopping by the Atlanta Sports Party. The Locked On Sports Atlanta YouTube channel is now streaming live 24/7. It's all things Atlanta sports 24/7. And remember to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're also free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you on the Atlanta Football Party on Monday.